On today's show, it is the final segment of our player capsule series, and that means a deep dive into Trae Young. It's part 1 of 2, and it's coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you here in October. And today's podcast, we'll be diving into Trae Young, the headline-grabbing player of the Atlanta Hawks. It's our final player capsule series installment with myself and Glen Willis of ATL on 29. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show to make us your first listen here at Locked On Hawks each and every day. Check us out, subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. That includes Spotify and Apple. We are also on YouTube, so please leave a like, comment, rating, review, etc., and tell your friends about the podcast as well. One more PSA here. This is pre-recorded, as a lot of these episodes have been. I'm still traveling right now, but I'll be back soon enough. And also, it's part 1 of 2. So please stay tuned. When part 1 is finished in the same podcast feed, part 2 should be available right away. So please stay tuned for that. And without any more delay, we'll dive in right now with myself and Glen Willis talking about Trae Young. I'm joined once again by my good friend Glen Willis of ATL on 29. Glen, we've reached the end. This is our final recorded player capsule of 2025. First of all, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Not only now, but always. I appreciate it.
No, these are fun. It's fun to spend some time breaking down, and it's also fun for us to try to not turn it into a 3-hour conversation and try to have some discipline to what we're doing here to the process and stuff. But, I mean, there's so many things you could say about Trae, but it feels like, I don't know, sometimes when you talk about Trae, you feel like there's someone like old school doll pulling the string on your back, and it's just the same stuff over and over. So hopefully we can add some nuance and perspective on maybe some different things we've seen in the last year or two as we kind of go through the conversation and make it at least not the same conversation kind of going over and over.
Yes, I think we will endeavor to do that. I've kind of talked about maybe it's not a journey, it's probably too far, but my own, maturation with Trae from day one. He's the rare player that's a franchise guy and been around his entire career in Atlanta that I've covered every minute of his career in Atlanta. And, he's matured. I have said this before, but if you told me in like 2018, 2019 that I would be higher than consensus on Trae Young, I would have been surprised by that. But I am now, it seems like, if you read what is out there. I think he's really good. And we'll talk all about that as we would with everybody else. We should say at the top of this, we've talked about the entire roster at this point. If you missed any of those, they're in the archive. Locked On Hawks. Glen was gracious enough to be a ton of time this summer, and more to come in the future on all kinds of things. But Trae Young as you kind of teed up there, it's kind of an easy one and a hard one. Like, on one hand, what is there to talk about for an hour with Trae Young? Right. On the other hand, we could probably talk about Trae Young for 3 hours if you and I wanted to go in every direction. So It's an interesting one for sure. He just turned 27 years old as we record this. By the way, we're recording this before Media Day. It's going to run after Media Day. So he might say some things. I don't know what he's going to say as we're recording this. Keep that in mind. Entering year 8. That's a crazy thing. I got to be honest with you, Glen. I'm shocked by that. He's entering year 8 of his career, but all in Atlanta. He's a 4-time All-Star. He probably should be a 5 or 6-time All-Star in my opinion, but he's only 4-time All-Star. And coming off the season in which he actually played the most minutes in his entire career. Regular season only. Obviously, if you include the playoffs, it wouldn't quite be that. But he played heavily, and that's interesting because what did kind of linger over last year, as a reminder to everyone, was that he was on the injury report pretty much all season long. Now, in the end, it kind of became a bit. They literally listed him every single game as probable for probably a month. But he had this right Achilles tendonitis issue that was real at one point. I don't know how real it kept being by the end of the season, but it was real when it was going on. But 76 games, he was 7th in total minutes in the whole league last year. That's a lot of minutes, a lot of wear and tear. But for a guy as small as he is, it's kind of a long windup, but he has played like 90% of the possible games in his career. He's just been extremely durable. Only missed one extended period when he had the kind of a freak injury where he tore his finger ligament in an accident. Not even like a durability injury, just a weird thing. So I say all that to say, Trae Young's still the face of the franchise, man. That might change. We'll talk about the extension stuff later on, but for now, he's the guy, and it's an interesting kind of way to parachute in after his last year was an interesting year. This is another one where I think he's got some heat on him too. Like I'm sure you've seen this too. Lists everywhere, like guys with the most pressure on him this season. He's on these lists for a lot of people. So a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, he's a guy who understands pressure, doesn't shy away from pressure ever.
Yep.
We could talk about like some end of game stuff that I felt was suboptimal this last year, but he doesn't shy away from taking those shots, trying to create those shots and take those shots for his team. And so he's a guy that steps up and really tries to give everything he can for his team, in my view. But you're watching this team last season, the one theme over and over and over was he needs more help. He needs more help. He needs more help. Right. And Ansi did a great job of kind of getting more help. And maybe we could talk a little bit, along the way around kind of how that looks different now. But for me, if I were to talk about one thing last season that just really impressed me over and over and over was the leadership, how he handled, I don't know how many hundreds of times he said in post game, not just me, but we, right? That was over and over and over. And he was zooming out to the whole team. He was supportive of young guys getting reps and opportunities, even if that cost them wins. Big picture. He was buying into the big picture of what they were trying to build. And I could not be more impressed with the way he approached. Again, he's hitting his peak, right? I mean, we could argue whether he's 1 or 2 or 3, whatever number of years into his peak, you could think that, but for him to be willing to, I don't know, sacrifice a year to let Dyson be a first-time starter and have starters workload for the first time in his career, we can go out to let Ricochet play in the first 3 quarters a lot, right? And all those sorts of things. And for him just to support that plan and that process, to me, says so much about the person that he is and his commitment to the organization and his commitment to his teammates. And we could talk about his efficiency challenges last year and what contributed to that, all that sort of stuff. But his leadership just jumped out at me all year last year. And I think he deserves a huge round of applause for his willingness to, okay, we might not make the playoffs, but we're trying to build for a 1 to 2 to 3 year kind of build up. And I think he deserves a ton of credit for that.
One of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly Open Phone. It's the same great business phone system that you have heard me talk about in the past, just with a new name, and here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps everything connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines communications in the customer realm. It works right through the app on your phone or your computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline in your own life. I love that Quo, formerly known as Open Phone, lets your team share one number and collaborate on calls and texts like a shared inbox, so no customer gets left hanging or behind. They built an AI agent that's also a game changer for you. It can answer calls after hours, capture leads, and even give your business keeping moving when you're off the clock your own self. Whether you're a solo operator juggling everything at the same time or part of a larger team, Quo makes everything really easy for you to stay responsive and professional. Set by over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started for free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedonnba. That's QUO.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over for you at actually no charge whatsoever. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. I totally agree. And, that was on the list to get into. We could do it now. I'm glad you brought it up because we'll talk about his on-court stuff as we would with anybody else. But I do, and maybe it's also the level of media coverage that Trae Young gets compared to everybody else on the team. That definitely matters too. But as someone who covers the Hawks as a primary thing, and you do this too, it's interesting to me the way he's discussed. And I talked about it a lot this summer, but I know we probably have new listeners for these capsules. And, there was the Patrick Beverley thing, for example, which got a lot of coverage. I don't really care about that, put that to the side. But it was a reminder of some of the, I would say, quite outdated narratives around Trae Young as a substandard leader and a guy that guys don't like playing with and stuff that I thought was overblown 6 years ago as someone who was covering the team. But I understood it back then. There were whispers around the team at times of a 19, 20-year-old kid who maybe wasn't ready to be like the every down leader of a locker room, which makes sense. The guy, he was the best player on the team, but he wasn't maybe ready for that.
Yep. And
if it was overblown then, it's like it shouldn't even be a thing now. I'm not telling you he's the greatest leader of all time. He's not Tim Duncan. He's not that. But he is a guy that I think and look, we don't know these guys the way that I will be the first to say I've covered Trae's whole career. Me and Trae are not like hanging out on the weekends. Like I don't know this guy like the way, you know what I mean? But
come on, you sure?
I am sure. But I've also seen Trae with my eyes, and to your point earlier, heard what he says and the way he carries himself, and people around the organization that won't lie to me about a number of things. And Trae's matured a ton. And it makes total sense. Like he's gone from age 18, 19 to where he's 27 years old. He's in that time he's gotten married, he's had kids, he's an adult now. And I don't mean that in a negative like he wasn't before, but like he's grown. He's a different guy now. And one way we can see that from the outside is exactly what you said. Like he now his comments are more about the team. He takes responsibility in a way he didn't always when he was younger too. When he doesn't play well, he'll say, "Hey, I didn't play well enough." Yeah. Which may seem like a small thing, but that matters. Like when you're the guy, like the way he carries. So all those things, the Patrick Beverley thing was silly, but it is a reminder to me that not everyone understands. Like not everyone has what the perspective that I have, and even that you have, of watching him all the time. Like this stuff lingers. It's kind of. I was laughing the other day about this. I think even with you on offline, it was like. He's still getting compared to Steph Curry, and it's like, why are we doing this? Like Steph Curry has not been a good comparison for Trae Young at any point. Much less, I got it when he was coming out of the draft, but like we could just stop with this. But when things set, and they get talked about a certain way. There's as we'll talk about later. There's the caricature of Trae's defense as like the worst of all time, and he said, okay, whatever. Like we could just be a little bit more reasonable with some of this stuff, and I think that Trae's leadership has improved greatly. His buy-in, that's a word I keep using a lot, but I mean it. The buy-in, like buy into Quinn, buy into your teammates, buy into the city. Like as we're talking today, it's not a huge thing, but like he was the guy doing the polling the siren, whatever they call it, the horn at the Falcons game. Like he's in the community. Auntie talked about him doing pickleball with his teammates before the season starts. Like little stuff like that builds. And his extension talks are going to be interesting, and they already are interesting. But as far as like what he is as a culture setter, as a leader, as a best player, and it helps, they built a team better around him than they have in a long time. That matters too. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it's just not trying to go out of my way to correct the record or whatever, but like he's not this like terrible leader. Like he's not. He's gotten a lot better at a lot of these things as he's gotten older.
Absolutely. And for me, it's like, I mean, I've never met Trae. I've never had a single conversation with Trae ever. Right. But I feel like as, I don't know, a mature / old person, I recognize maturity. I recognize growth. And I think that a lot of people maybe close to Trae might, and this is me speculating, I want to be clear about that, right? Would say this isn't the most natural thing for Trae to do, right? You hear the word introvert or whatever, but he is leaning into that stuff, even if it feels a little bit weird to him, maybe. Again, I want to say I'm speculating. I don't know him at all, right? But him leaning into that, you hear he was vital to recruiting Nicole Alexander-Walker and others to the team this year. That's part of being the best player on your team, is making those phone calls, making those contacts, all that sort of stuff and everything. That's part of the job when you're the face of the franchise, to do those things, even if it feels a little bit unnatural to you, or maybe a lot. I can't say for him, like a little natural or a lot unnatural in those things, but he's stepping in too and doing those things. And my favorite thing about Trae's journey, and this is not me criticizing Trae. Trae came to the league at 19 years old, was immediately the centerpiece. I mean that. How often does that happen? That is a very rare thing for a 19-year-old to come and be the centerpiece. And what I would encourage people to do is to go look at his first regular season game winner was the putback kind of rebound, like 12-foot rebound against the Bucks, and look at how his teammates reacted to him in that game. This is not me criticizing Trae. Trae was 19 years old, right? Trae, to expect him to have a great relationship with everybody on the team, to know how to navigate all the relationships, ridiculous expectation for him. Now, and then go Google or go on YouTube and look at the more recent game winners he's had, and look at the difference between that game winner and others, where his teammates are just rushing him and celebrating him, and he's celebrating with his teammates and all that sort of. I mean, that to me, that is my favorite sign of like his growth. It's like clearly his teammate. I don't care what Patrick Beverley says. It's a little bit weird for me because I'm a defensive guy. I think Patrick Beverley hypes up his own defensive acumen more than probably deserved.
Correct.
But at the same time, I'm like, does Patrick Beverley really have a relationship with Trae? And when Trae put that response out, I think that was that his pod that he kind of posted that to? I think it was. I don't
Sure.
I don't have time for a ton of podcasts, outside of just a handful of things and stuff like that. But for Trae to, as an introvert, to kind of push back on that, but to do it in a quasi respectful way, to kind of soften it a little bit, I thought that was good. But for me to look at, I'm sorry, you watch this team play game in, game out at this point in time. His teammates trust him. His teammates appreciate him. His teammates value him. He gives space for guys who are in a role that they're maybe not ready for. And he's like, take those reps, take those opportunities. I trust you. I'm going to believe in you. And to me, if that doesn't like evoke a confidence of leadership to someone who's really just kind of grown into that. And I do think a part of that is having become a dad. As a dad, I say that myself, right? A part of that is having a broader worldview of those things. A part of that is having a coach that he clearly trusts a lot, right? And is taking that. And in my mind, I just can't say enough about his journey to where he is out today, to be that open-minded and broad, have that broad perspective on what it takes to build up to being able to accomplish another deep run in the playoffs. I couldn't be more impressed. We can get into what he does well, what he doesn't do well, what he can do better. I know we'll get into that sort of stuff, but to me, that stuff, as the most important player on the team, that stuff has to be there, and he has sold out into those responsibilities, in my view, from what we can see, and I think he deserves a ton of credit for it.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually help you get paid. Don't miss the excitement of football season right now with PrizePicks, where it is good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun and simple way to add more excitement to your football this year. Just pick more or less on simple player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards, Saquon Barkley's rushing yards for touchdowns, etc., and you're in the game. One thing I really love about PrizePicks is actually how quick and easy it actually is. You can make a lineup right now in less than a minute, and it's very, very user-friendly. Also, you enjoy using the stacks feature that PrizePicks just added. If you want to go ahead and rise up with a player, you can select their passing yards, rushing yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow other players in the app, copy lineups with one click if you want to, and they have a new injury reboot feature that you actually have to check out. If your player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't actually count against you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA and get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. That code is LOCKEDONNBA in the PrizePicks app, $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup is played. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. So we can transition a little bit to the on-court, and I think it's a good bit of background. Like honestly kind of unplanned, but I think it worked out well how that went. But as far as, let's just go to the offense. Like sometimes it's like cute to go with the other side of the floor with us. Yeah. Trae's defense is worth talking about. We will, but offensively, obviously he is the engine of the team. That's not up for debate, of course. I have my favorite stat from last season with Trae was that he was responsible for more points last season than any player in the NBA other than Nikola Jokic, who I believe to be the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic, personally. And by the way, when I say responsible for, I mean points plus assists.
Sure.
Basically, directly responsible for. Now, is that a perfect metric? No. But it does kind of tell you the workload Trae is carrying, how good he was, and also the value of his assists, which gets ignored for whatever reason. Maybe it's the faulty Steph Curry comparison that I was ranting on earlier. Like, for whatever reason, Trae Young just led the league in assists, like, comfortably, and still doesn't come up in these conversations. It's like the best passer in the world. It's like, wow, What are we? Anyway, so interestingly enough, and we'll talk about his efficiency as a scorer in a second, his role has changed a little bit. Now, not entirely, but his usage rate last year was a 6-year low. And I don't know if anybody caught up to that necessarily. Look, he's still a high usage player, has the ball a lot. That's not going to ever change. But it's not quite the every down, like totally heliocentric approach that it once was. I think that's fair to say. They run their offense differently now with Quinn. Quinn fully installed now, like none of the remnants of previous. It's Quinn's system that they're running now. And I say that he still ran more pick and rolls last year per synergy than any player in the league. So he still has the ball a lot. Yeah. But it was less usage than it's been in the past. Even without, this is actually funny to me, Glenn. He had a lower usage rate last year than he did when he was playing with DeJounte Murray.
Yeah, crazy.
Which you would think when they had DeJounte, he would have taken it, but that was more your turn, my turn with DeJounte and Trae, and we won't talk about that again. But I started with that because how do you think his role changed last season or even the year before, if you want to go that far back. And then also now factoring in the additional guys they have now, another scorer in Porzingis especially. How do you think that might change a little bit more as the season goes along? Or is it going to be more like last year? What do you kind of envision Trae like operating within the system in the way that he's doing?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting because he missed some games. I mean, he plays through injury. Clearly, that's something he does, for good or bad. And we have different opinions on that, but I think a lot of his teammates respect it. But for me, I think when a team kind of says we're running everything through Trae when he's on the court, what do you do when you don't have that guy? Right? That's really what it comes down to, right? And can someone else kind of step into a quasi-primary or secondary or whatever role it is, and there is more ball movement. And people will say he doesn't play off the ball. He played off the ball last year. Now it was some basic action, starting him in the corner, bringing him into a DH, letting say Dyson kind of start a set, bringing Trae in through strong or weak action. Teams call it strong or weak action, kind of coming out of the corner, bringing him on the ball to get him leverage on the play that he wouldn't have if he just dribbled the ball up and kind of started the play with all 5 sets of eyeballs on him. And so there's a lot more diversity into how they're kind of bringing him into action and those sorts of things. And he bought into that, right? For sure. And so for me, I think Quinn believes in ball movement, player movement, pace. He talks about pace all the time, right?
Yep.
All the time. And pace is not your point guard driving the ball across midcourt with 17 on the shot clock, and then you're down to 12 before you kind of getting into primary. Quinn does not buy into that at all, right? Now, the difference is, the other thing you and I talked about before, and I talked about in 18-29, is that against the bottom 10, 12 defenses in the league, you can just spam pick and roll with that. They can't stop it, right? Because they just don't have the personnel, whatever. When you're wanting to be a playoff team, wanting to get to a second round of playoffs, you're playing the best defenses in the league, you can't just spam pick and roll 80% of your possessions against the top 8 or whatever number of defenses in the league. They're going to just take that away from you. And you have to have a counter, a secondary, a next action, or whatever it is. And so the Hawks this past season had to build up the muscle memory around the counter, all those sorts of things. And for that, Trae had to give up the ball. Trae had to set a screen. Trae had to get off the ball, come back on the ball, right? And those sorts of things. And I think all of us would say, if you look at his first, 3, 4, 5 years in the league, he wanted to be on the ball, kind of setting everyone up and kind of running everything.
Yep.
But to me, another impressive part of his last season was him being like, okay, yeah, this is what it takes for us to not just kind of run the same action 11 possessions in a row against the top 5 defense and think that's going to work, right? And so that buy into that aspect as well was critical. They run a ton of wham action, that they run where they kind of run through the big at the either one side or other side of the free throw line. They run split cuts when they kind of get into trouble on the strong side, and those sorts of things. And Trae wasn't just standing there like, you watch people on social media say Trae doesn't do anything off ball. That's not true. Like last year, he would set a screen, he would move, he would ask for a screen, he would get back on the ball, all those sorts of things. And it was new. And in the first 20 games, 25 games of the year, it looked a little clunky for everyone, not just Trae. It looked a little clunky for everyone. But as they kind of kept buying in, that was there. And the thing that I think where it showed up was the game Trae missed. We'll point out, for example, the Boston game where Dyson led the offensive attack. If they had not had those other kind of, responsibilities a little more distributed this past season than in prior seasons, Dyson doesn't have the confidence to do that. Dyson's a super confident, enormously confident player, right? But because of Trae being willing to delegate some of the opportunity and workload and volume and usage, it allowed them to win some games that he wasn't playing in that previously, and somebody might text me or tweet like, this is their record without Trae the last 5. I know they won some games, right? And that in that sense and stuff like that. But if you kind of want to kind of really dig in the nuance, him being willing to delegate usage this past season to kind of create those other capabilities and those other things to be developed across teammates was a big part of why they won some games when Trae didn't play last year.
Yeah, there's an old adage around the league. You probably heard it too. Like teams can generally navigate a game or two without their best player. Very not easily, but like it's like you could do it for short periods. It's when you're without your best player for a long time. That's when you really start to feel it. And the Hawks are a pretty good example of that. The last couple, like he'll miss a game here and there, and they're able to they get stuff from Keaton, or they get stuff from Dyson. They can kind of patch it, and then you look up at the end of the season, and the on-off splits are what the on-off splits are, and
But Trae's out, or a guy like Trae's out 6 weeks. 3 or 4 games of video gets created, and that gets passed around the league. And they're like, okay, these are the 2, 3 things they're running. We're just going to load up against those things. And the players who aren't Trae don't have the experience and the broad set of talents to kind of recognize what's coming and do something. Trae has that in spades, right? For sure. Yeah. But you're right. Trying to prepare to play 15, 20, 25 games with a guy like that, way harder.
And look, they're 10. It's actually a good way to get this in there. Last year, they were 10 points exactly per 100 possessions worse on offense with Trae off the court.
Yeah.
And that's makes sense on one level. They actually were better overall than they have been in the past at withstanding non-Trae minutes, but it's mostly because they just defended like crazy with Trae off the court, which makes sense too. That's a good theory of team building to say, you know what, when Trae's off the floor, we're going to muck it up and we're going to play defense. And now they could even go to these Dyson Nikhil lineups where they can really make it hard on the opposing offenses. That's a decent way to navigate it. But offensively, they're just not the same team when he's not playing. That's very natural. Most superstars have that drop off. Jokic has that drop off. Shea has that drop off. And I know those guys are better than Trae, but as far as offensively, they're kind of similar in the way that they are relied upon to what Trae is. It's funny. The role is interesting because I think I'm pretty sure this is Zach Lowe's stat, but he said it a bunch of times. There's the other thing about Trae setting the most screens ever set in a season last year, by leaps and bounds.
Yep.
And that's a small thing too. And you might not think, oh, why is Trae setting screens? Well, it can be very helpful. You're not running pick and roll with Trae as a screener, as a primary action, but if he's willing to get in there, stick his nose in there, and get in the way, it can create mismatches. There's things you can run off of that. And again, that's another thing to the buy-in. Trae being willing to do that and doing it more and more might sound like a small thing, but not necessarily a small thing. And he's, more spot ups too. Not off the chart spot ups, but more for instance, the most corner threes he's ever taken in his career last year. Corner threes are generally not a self-created thing. You're spotting up in those cases. You're not dribbling to the corner and shooting a three. It's most of the time those are catch and shoot. So it's just little things here and there to he has changed his profile a bit, even if the perception of the high usage is there. Because he still has the ball a ton. You just have the same thing. He's going to have the ball a lot. That's just what's going to be. But it's sweet.
Yeah, I can think of so many times last year where he gave the ball up, where in prior seasons maybe that wasn't his first preference.
Yeah.
Put it softly. Give the ball up, relocate to the corner. Give the ball up, relocate to the corner. There's open. Oh, I give the ball up, the corner's open. I relocate, and it's just buying into that movement and motion and pace and stuff like that. Just was very, very different, very, very different last year. And a lot of those screens, one of Quinn's favorite thing to do at times on ATO is to have Trae start under the rim or on the baseline and set a back screen when his defender's this is the last thing I expect Trae to do is to set a back screen to create a lob, or to create, the stress of one guy moving towards the rim, one guy moving up to the rim, that kind of bi-directional way to the movement that you stress the defense with. And Trae doing that is I loved watching Trae do that stuff. I loved watching Trae do that stuff because, like I said, his defender being oh, this is something Trae's. It wouldn't.
I think he likes that too. I can't remember what game. I have a memory of him setting a screen that worked directly for an easy bucket, and he just a giant smile and grin on his face, hey, I did. Hey, I kind of did that. I set that up. So anyway, a little thing there. I do want to get to efficiency. But first, before we get to the efficiency questions, and they're big. This has been a very pro Trae conversation so far. That's a real question he has. Yeah. Before we get to that, I teased this earlier, but I want to make sure we drive it home. Trae is, in my opinion, the best passer that is a guard-sized player in the NBA.
Yep.
If you want to argue that Nikola Jokic is a better passer than Trae, I'm fine with that. I don't want to argue with you. Even someone like Luka, whatever. There are guys who are bigger. LeBron, of course, still has this. Right. Guys that are bigger, there's different passes they can access that Trae can't access. Fine. At a minimum for me, Trae is a top 5 passer in the world. And like I just said, to me, he's the best passing guard. If you want to put Halliburton in there or whatever, fine. I'd take Trae. And the favorite fun fact is, of course, Trae has increased his assists per game in every season of his NBA career. Yeah. Can he do it again? I don't know. He got to 11.6 last year. This will be a nice test to see if we can get above that. But one more fun one, Glenn, and then I want you to react. Trae Young at this moment in late September, early October of 2025 is number 3 in the history of the NBA in assists per game. He is behind John Stockton and Magic Johnson. If you polled people in the world, would they know that? I kind of don't think they would. Like the way he does not get discussed that way. Yeah. He just doesn't. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. I mean, for me, he is such a dynamic passer. He could pass from any angle. He can make long passes. I mean, he can be like 3/4 court and hit a guy with a lob to the rim if the guy has the space to do it. For me, when someone wants to have an argument over Trae as a guard and Jokic to me, it's a little like you can pick whatever metaphor or analogy you want. It's a little like animal, mineral, like they're two like Jokic as a center is completely different context.
Yes.
And Jokic is awesome, like phenomenal. Like it's so fun to watch. Like nothing but showering praise on him. But it's a different completely different positional context. And so for me, it's like I said, it's just like comparing two things that aren't the same thing, to me, right? I mean, Jokic doesn't have to run a pick and roll, right? Trae has to run a pick and roll and read the whole floor. Jokic, a lot of time it's at the nail or 5 feet up from the nail, and they're running split cuts or bi-directional kind of thing. It's a simpler action and stuff like that. But Jokic nails those passes like consistently and deserves a ton of praise. But to me, it's just like trying to argue like, I don't know, a BMW versus a something. What you choose, whatever analogy you want, right? Trae is a completely ridiculous passer. And for the fact that last year they were, I don't know, an average offense for most of the season. Now, after the trade deadline, they were top 5 in offensive rating and 3-point percentage from there on. And they didn't really have a ton of shooting. Like it helped them that Terrence Mann shot way over his normal 3-point baseline. And of course they had Niang and all those sorts of stuff and everything. But for me, it's like just someone like not thinking that he's one of the best. I don't even want to have the argument. Like if you think Luka's better, fine. I don't care. Luka has Luka's a lot bigger, so he has different angles like to kind of lean on that Trae has to create the space and angles that he doesn't naturally have like Luka has. And Luka's awesome. Like there's no doubt about that. Luka's phenomenal, fun to watch. But it's a different skill set that Trae has to kind of use pace, set up, get his defender one step off of, Trae has to set his guy up, but he's an in and out dribble to do that. He uses all sorts of moves to kind of get his defender set up to create the space that he needs as a smaller guy. But yeah, no doubt at all that Trae is just like just a savant passing the basketball.
Yeah. And we'll move on from this, but I think it's also worth emphasizing that he had 11.6 assists per game last year, which is crazy high. He also had a team that was, I think it's fair to say, most of the season was below average in shooting around him.
For sure.
While still doing that. And also he led the league in potential assists, which is a synergy stat, by an even bigger margin than his actual assist lead. Yeah. He averaged 20.7 potential assists per game. Like his percentage of assists that were versus potential assists is actually way lower than a lot of guys at the top. Like he could have averaged 13 assists a game, like on a team that had more firepower.
Like, if Nance doesn't get hurt, Nance gives you a shot maker with the fire. Right? There's just all these kind of things that happened. They were leaning into Mo game minutes, and Mo, like sometimes he makes his threes, sometimes he doesn't make his threes, but you value his defensive value and all that sort of stuff. So, but the thing I love about Trae is like even if a guy missed a 3-point shot, keep shooting that, keep taking that shot, keep taking that shot. And just that vote of confidence from your leader is big. So yeah, the efficiency thing I know is probably the spiciest kind of part of the discussion. Well, it'll be interesting to see if we have similar perspectives on that or not, but I think there is stuff to talk to there.
All right, that is all for part 1 of 2 with myself and Glen Willis talking about Trae Young in deep dive fashion. Part 2 should be available in this same podcast feed right away, so go ahead and subscribe to the show. Stay tuned for part 2. Find us on Apple, find us on Spotify, find us on YouTube, etc. Follow the show if you'd like to at Locked On Hawks on Twitter/X. I am there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And then follow my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, part 2 available right now on the same podcast feed, and we'll see you all next time.